Well, no, it's ready to go. That image may take a second before you see it up there. That's just because they're switching.
All right, call this meeting back to order. Now we have, we're at an ordinance rezone properties on Carlton Avenue and Franklin Street. Carlton Views to planned unit development, first of two readings. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize, this will take a minute to go through, but I feel this information is important for the City Council. Mayor, City Council, tonight you're reviewing an application to rezone 4 parcels near the intersection of Carlton Avenue and Franklin Street from the existing MI to planned unit development. The rezoning request is part of a larger development plan that started back in 2012. The first phase of the development was the completion of the By Right Blue Ridge Pace Center. Completed in the summer of 2014, the Pace Center offers healthcare and health-related services designed to keep individuals living in their homes and communities for as long as possible. In May of 2013, City Council passed a special use permit permitting the maximum residential density allowed in the MI district, which was 21 dwelling units per acre. This SUP covered all 4 parcels of the Carlton View development. In July of 2015, the final site plan for Carlton View's apartment, which is referred to as Carlton View 1, received approval for the 54 dwelling units. The construction was completed in early 2017. At the time of this report, all 54 units were rented out to residents making under 60% AMI. In January 2018, Planning Commission approved the preliminary site plan for a 48-unit apartment, Carlton View 2. In early 2018, City Council awarded $1.4 million for acquisition of the site for affordable units. Once completed, all 48 units will be rented out to residents making under 60% AMI. Currently, the site plan for Carlton View 2 is awaiting posting of bonds before construction begins. At the completion of Carlton View 2, the development will have exhausted all available density under the SUP. As the zoning ordinance only allows 21 dwelling units per acre in the MI district, the developer needs to rezone all 4 parcels to increase the density if they want a residential building in the final phase of the development. The development does not have the option of only rezoning the last remaining parcel, as that would remove acres from the existing parcels, making them non-conforming. The MI district was established to allow areas for light industrial uses that have a minimum environmental impact. Most uses allowed in this zoning district are commercial and industrial in nature with limited residential uses allowed. The 2013 comprehensive plan indicates the subject property remain business and technology. Business and technology is described as properties that would permit small-scale office to cater startup businesses and technological development, as well as commercial activity that does not generate the amount of traffic that can be found in more consumer-oriented commercial areas. The applicant is proposing to rezone the 4 parcels to planned unit development to accommodate higher density development than the current 21 dwelling unit acres allows through the SUP. The 2013 comp plan does not designate areas that neatly align to the PUD designation, as this is a special zoning category. The closest land use description from the 2013 comp plan is mixed use. Mixed use is described as areas intended to be zoned where the city encourages development of a moderate to high density and intensity and where large variety of uses are permitted, including many commercial uses, residential uses, and some limited research manufacturing where appropriate. According to the development plan's mixed use matrix, uses permitted within the PUD would be consistent with most of the current uses permitted with the MI district, with some exclusions and additions. All the non-residential industrial uses have been removed as allowed, such as construction yard, kennels, storage yard companies. The main use proposed in the development plan are multifamily and non-residential. The application indicates the total allowable unit count for the development to be 154, and a total non-residential build-out of 50,000 square feet. Currently, the site is utilizing 20,000 square feet for the PACE Center and 102 residential units. This leaves a total of 30,000 square feet of non-residential use and 52 residential units remaining for development. Residential units could be spread throughout the site, but the non-residential uses would be limited to Phase 1, 30,000 square feet, Phase 2, 7,500 square feet, Phase 3, 5,000 square feet, Phase 4, 7,500 square feet. Should the rezoning be approved, the overall density for the site will increase from the maximum 21 DUA to a maximum 32 DUA. Under the future land use map definition, this density is considered high-density residential. It should be noted, regardless of the rezoning, the subject properties are already high-density residential based on the 21 DUA type and the type of housing, which is apartment. On May 8th and November 13th, Planning Commission held a joint public hearing on this rezoning, and concerns related to the amount of and configuration of open space, lack of innovation of building layout and design, pedestrian connectivity within the development, amenities, transit access, and other concerns were brought up. At the end of the hearing, Planning Commission voted 5-2 to recommend approval of the PUD to City Council. I'm available to answer questions, and the applicant is going to provide a short presentation and can also answer questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, and just as a note of clarification, I know the proposed ordinance that first went out was incorrect and it's been updated. I have copies of the updated if no one has them.
I think we get someone brought up to us. Thank you.
All right. Is there any questions?
Can we ask him a question now? I feel like I was in the room both times this came in front of Planning Commission. Someone earlier brought this up. I feel like there were several things that were asked for that first time around. And in your opinion, do you feel that those things were responded to? Because I feel even during the second conversation, it was acknowledged that some of those amenities and those considerations were really not addressed.
Correct. When the first came to Planning Commission, there was concerns about the open space configuration. The second time that the application was presented, there was no substance change to the application. There was some clarifications, I think, made to show open space better on the development plan, show pedestrian path within this development, but there was no redesign or any substance change to what the material that was submitted the first time and the second time.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one quick question. maybe not a quick answer, but why wasn't the PUD the strategy to begin with in 2013 or 2012 when this whole thing began?
My understanding from the history of this project, when they started, they had this sense that they were going to be the Pace Center and the supported housing. I can't speak directly. The applicant maybe can speak why they didn't pursue a PUD in 2013. But one of the things we've heard in conversations is just the success of Carlton View 1. They saw they could do an increased density instead of the 102 that was allowed through the SUP. And this avenue was the only way to allow that third building. Even the original plan had called for the Pace Center in 3 buildings, but the density was less. That 102 was spread out between the 3 buildings instead of spread in the 2 buildings.
Still not sure I quite get that, but, again, because it's odd that it's at the very end of the whole life of this project that the PUD is being requested at parcel number 4, when a PUD is something that I would have thought would have been, because I remember in 2013, I voted against the project, the first SUP, because I asked that question. Why wasn't it a PUD?
No, and I agree. It's surprising that it was an SUP instead of a PUD. It was just nothing the applicant ever brought forward as wanting to do. They wanted to pursue at that time the SUP.
Okay, so staff doesn't recommend the staff. Okay.
No, staff's not going to recommend what the applicant brings forward.
From the applicant?
Staff doesn't recommend it, but the planning commission
No,
did.
you're talking about just what they brought forward.
Just the brought forward.
But
Okay.
yeah,
That's what I was. All right, got you. I got it now.
Okay.
That's I had to clarify because I'm like, what? Got you. Okay.
So are we going to hear from the applicant? Yeah, all right.
Good evening, Mayor Walker and councilors. I'm Kevin Wood. I'm the owner's rep for the owners at Carlton Views and Pace Center. I'm here with Scott Collins of Collins Engineering, who prepared the application plan and the application narrative in combination with me. I don't know that we'll go into the presentation too much. These are the same slides that we had at the Planning Commission meeting. I thought we'd have them just in case we need them. That's where we were when we started back in 2012. That is the initial SUP plan, and you see that there were 3 buildings there, Building A, C1, and C2. Those buildings averaged 34 units a building. We're now asking for buildings averaging about 50 units a building. And that was the old H.T. Farron Center where the Pace Center currently is. There's the new Pace Center. It's been operating quite successfully for the last 3 years, I think. That is the site where Carlton 1 is standing. You see it's a very difficult to develop site with a lot of topography, and of course it was an old concrete plant, so there's a lot of demolition on this site and the remaining sites, which increases costs. Some more pictures of that, and there's Carlton 1. I guess the things I wanted to cover quickly tonight were the reason we're here, of course, I think, and the reason we've gotten to where we are, it was the initial question, is because that we found from 2013 to 2017, things changed a little bit, and the need for affordable housing and our ability to deliver affordable housing became more apparent. Mm-hmm. So initially, in the SUP phase, we thought that 21 DUA would be enough, and there would probably be some other commercial activities on the site. As we started to develop these using the low-income housing tax credit, we found out that 54 units was really kind of the sweet spot and created the economies of scales needed to create the financial feasibility and make a project viable at VHDA during a VHDA application. So we built this, then went for approval for the next building, which we call Carlton 2. That's on Site A, and as Matt said, it's been approved. And then realizing that we were being successful both here at City Council and at VHDA, we thought we'd ask for a 3rd building, and we needed the additional density. So this has always been about finding a way, a mechanism by which we could create additional density and create one more building. So that's really all this is. I think we get into the weeds of the PUD as a result of doing that. I think that's brought up some good questions. What we found is in based on the 5-2 vote, that we do meet the requirements of a PUD. I think there are some questions about the innovation in a PUD. Is the open space program properly? Are we innovative in building styles? That's what we've been, with some of the questions that have been asked of us. For me, I think that the development is cohesive and innovative, not always in design, but very innovative in financial structure, very innovative in working with a central commercial project, the Pace Center, that complements well the residential facilities, and also a Pace Center that subsidizes or has entered into an MOU to agree to subsidize some of the units. It's also innovative that it's not only bringing affordable housing, it's affordable and accessible housing. All of the units are universal design units. It's also innovative in that it meets all the requirements for VHDA's tax credit program. So that's why we're here. I think we've created a project that is very innovative on those points. And I'm available to answer questions as needed.
I do have a question about your thoughts about the open space, because a lot of the building area indicates plaza, and that has been a lot of questions that we've received recently from the public is what does this mean to you? What do you envision that to be?
I see
detailed as?
plaza at this stage as a very generic term, and really just denoting open space more than anything else. I think we have an intention in the first, if we can, and we have the funding available, to create a plaza along Carlton Avenue. And that would be probably a hardscaped area with some benches and other items that fronted on the street and created a buffer between the street and the building. But where we are now, the programming is we're not anywhere near programming that space. So, and we don't really know what the funding needs will be in terms of additional VHDA amenities, green building amenities like Earthcraft and Energy Star, which have been increased in this round, 2019 application round. So we will not be programming that space specifically until we get into the site planning phase, which will not be until after we get the credits approved.
So a follow-up question to that is, it's my understanding that you needed a critical mass of units before you could have an on-site 24/7 concierge or management service, and is that true? And secondarily, if you get that on-site management service, will they be more engaged with the residents so that they could participate in some of the kind of exterior design possibilities? Is there any vision about how the integration
I
between
think
management and residency will work?
I think that's possible. I think we're already, as the development team is already somewhat engaged with all of the residents. And we've talked a lot about what the needs for open space are. We found out that by allowing pets in the building, for example, we probably need some pet space on the exterior. There are a few more kids in the development than we expected at the beginning. The children, there are families with children on site, and we really expected this to be primarily elderly and disabled families. So there are needs for open space that we will continue to look into, or for programmed open space that we will continue to look into. But like I say, we haven't gotten there yet.
But again, my question about, will there be on-site management at this point?
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, what we are anticipating is that on-site management will come as the increase in units come. So either at the second building, which we will have more comprehensive management, or on-site management there more of the time. And then by the time we have 150 units, if that is approved, we would expect to have a full-time on-site staff.
So how does the current management and owners feel about at the current locations, the concerns of the health and safety concerns?
Well, I think some of that has been growing pains. The perception is it's been growing pains with a new building and the lack of on-site staff, so that we're addressing those not as quickly as we would have liked to, but they are being addressed. And like I say, as we get more economies of scale there and can afford an on-site management, we will be that much more responsive.
So that wasn't considered in the first or
Well,
second phase, the need for that?
Well, I think we're learning this as we're developing the other two phases. So it's always been at the back of our mind. I think we were not quite happy with how things were being managed early on in the project. Some of the management has changed over there. We haven't changed the on-site manager, but some of the staff has been changed. So that I know that the developer is on top of this, and as this is a major concern, they want to see their building well maintained as well. So, and I do think that the economies of scale, as we sit here today, do not allow for full-time management, but will allow as income rises with additional units.
So the 1 point, the allocation for funding is dependent on the, you all receiving the LIHTC credits. What are the plans if you don't receive any of the LIHTC funding?
Well, you know that we have received LIHTC funding for Carlton 2, and we're awaiting permanent financing there.
But for this new project?
For the new, it's back to the drawing board. I don't think there's any current Plan B for the stages. We will have to, if the PUD is approved, we will have to adhere to the use matrix that is presented in the PUD, so we will have a different zoning environment. But this has all been about a mechanism to get to this project. And we believe, since we've been successful at both 1 and 2, that we should be successful in this upcoming 2019 round.
Mr. Blair, for this round, they would be competing with at least Piedmont Housing, right?
I believe so, and I believe also CRH.
I asked that the other day,
Well,
and
they
they said
said
that was a
CRHA
different
is
bucket
different.
for public housing.
Okay, they're not going to apply to the same.
Well, no,
Well, it's a different
we'll be
category.
applying, but
But-
because it's public housing, it's a
Right,
completely different
Which I think we
category.
need to look into.
No, we've got clarification.
From who?
HUD.
There's some debate about this,
Yes.
whether public housing is got a separate pool of money or whether public housing projects get additional points that other projects can't get.
Right.
Well, what I can say to that, I don't know about the public housing front, but from our perspective, we are in a distinct pool, which is the accessible supportive housing pool. There are several different geographic pools. And this accessible supportive housing pool has in the past, it's changing slightly this year, but will continue to be a non-competitive pool. So if you meet the requirements of the pool.
That's for the 4%?
For the housing. No, it's 9% credit still.
9%.
But it's the accessible supportive housing pool. So we really, for that reason, we really won't be competing with PHA because they will be in the competitive Central Virginia pool. So
Okay.
what we're expecting is that, and this is kind of the innovation really, is we were able to fund both of the first two buildings in that pool. We expect that we will, that's what we're shooting for. And we wouldn't be, because of the costs associated with this project and other factors, we would not be competitive. PHA is more competitive than we are because they're Section 8 housing. We do not have vouchers attached to all of our units. That's why we have the PACE MOU. That covers the vouchers that are required in our specific pool, which is, it's a little bit of esoterica, but it's a pool that really has been called in the past the non-competitive pool.
I know we talked some about the planning commission, but if you don't get that higher level of funding and you don't move forward with kind of that affordable housing commitment, and then obviously then there's money that the city would be kind of pulling back from. It was just, you're looking at market rate units at that point. Because the zoning is kind of limiting you to what you can do.
That's right. And at this stage, we would have to either look at that or come back for another rezoning. Right? If there was a commercial activity, the problem we're finding down there is we really do think this is the highest and best use. And we haven't had success in coming up with another development plan that we think would be feasible. This is a solid development plan that we've done a couple of times and believe can work. So it could be that it would be several years before we could come up with a new development strategy for this parcel.
When you talk about these plazas generically, I was under the impression that for PUDs, it's almost like everything kind of has to be kind of set in stone, and there's not a lot of flexibility to be changing things after this plan is approved. Because when the MACA stuff was being discussed, that came up quite often, as if there's any changes that were.
So
Right now, I just feel like it's kind of an open-ended to me. I don't really don't really have the vision yet for what this open space is gonna look like, and I'm trying to understand what commitment do they have to make at this point?
So this comes down, and this is what I think can get frustrating to staff, to planning commission, to city council, is it can come down to the level of the plan unit development. So if your plan unit development is calling out very specific things, and then the next phase is going to be the site plan phase, and if that site plan comes in and does not match very specific details, then that's where the problem comes in. And something like this, what they're really showing in their development plan are the footprints of their building, the kind of their building envelope. They're not giving exact detail of the building, so there's flexibility there. The parking, they're showing where the parking's going, but again, they're giving a total count for their parcel. For the open space, they are more generic. They're showing their open space, but they're not programmed it. If you had an approved plan unit development that had a very specific, detailed development plan with that open space, and they came in with something different, staff would say this doesn't match up. Something like this, I do believe staff would have more flexibility because they're showing open space but not programmed. So the concern we would have is if you're designating open space and you come in and you're building footprints there, we would say no. But if you're showing open space as open space and you come in with either playground equipment or you come in with a paved plaza with benches or a grass area, I believe we would say that meets your PUD plan as open space. Does that?
No.
No?
No, I mean, it answers the question. I don't.
I mean, that's where city council, I mean, if you feel it's not as detailed as you want to see in a plan, I mean, and it might not be then a plan you would want to approve.
How, just a follow-up, but
couple-
it meets the definition of open space in the planned unit development ordinance, correct?
Correct. It meets the definition of open space in the planned unit in that section of the code. What I was just getting at is if we've run into this in some past PUDs where their development plan is so detailed, there was no room for, in staff's opinion, no room for fluctuation. We've had PUD plans in the past that left more room for staff to make that determination that this meets the development plan that's in front of us. So it gets down to that level that really the city's comfortable with. If you're comfortable with designated open space but not programmed, this plan does that. But if city council is not comfortable with that, we don't feel this plan is detailed enough,
Right.
then that's something y'all aren't comfortable with.
Right. I actually wrote something, and I would love to hear a response. I just kind of jotted some things down. So I just wanted to say, so I'm very enthusiastic about the new apartments, about the thought of the new apartments, although I do have some issues with how they have been run in the past, as we've heard from residents earlier during the council meeting. Currently, I'm rather reluctant to vote for it as it is without some additional details. So at present, I'm kind of feeling like a deferral is best, and here's kind of why. One of the PUD objectives is to provide for developments designed to function as cohesive, unified projects. So PACE helps to unify, but we've heard from residents that they need places site-wide to recreate. So, for example, like the children who live there, they need a basketball in the parking lot, a basketball hoop in the parking lot. The old people or the elders need somewhere to sit outside on a summer day that has cover. Moms and dads, they need a place to supervise their little kids at play. And I went back and listened to the Planning Commission as they were talking about it, and Commissioner Yates, he was asking about tot lots and pocket parks last month. And the response was maybe they could be on parcel D. It's close to a quarter-mile walk from one end to the site to other, from Carlton Views 2 to Carlton Views 3. And you all own the entire site, all 4 parcels. The green space shown needs to be redrawn. The green space shown needs to be redrawn. Show the details, several tot lots and several pocket parks, somewhere sheltered to sit, somewhere to grill, somewhere to garden. I'm looking for more detail. We kind of got this detail from PHA with the Friendship Court Phase 1 plan. And I was just wondering, I mean, is this plausible? I mean, is it possible for you all, or love to hear your response?
I think it is very difficult for a couple of different reasons. One, we're
Okay.
under incredibly tight timeline, and we need this zoning in place before the application, because
Okay.
that's a prerequisite for the application. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that I think in our proffer statement, what people don't realize is when you proffer affordability, we're under very tight budget constraints. There is a limited resource that we will be able to get from VHDA and other financiers. Of course, you guys have chipped in quite nicely and aggressively.
Very generously.
Yes, very generously, for sure. But at this stage, the program that VHDA is requiring for the building is very aggressive as well. I mean, they are saying you have to have an Energy Star building. It has to be Earthcraft. You have to have a ResNet rating of such and such. These things cost money, so, and all of the universal design units have to have roll-in showers, 2 drains in the floor, tile floors. So this housing is more expensive than the normal housing that you would see on a green site for sure, and also if it wasn't VHDA housing. So at this stage, the funding priorities are becoming quite onerous. The construction costs are getting high. The site costs on this are very difficult to bear because of all of the demolition that has to be done. So it's going to be hard for us at this stage of design, both for the building and for the open space, to commit to a high level of specificity in what we can do with open spaces. We certainly would like to canvass the community more broadly than we have and find out what are the priorities. Do we need a pet space? Do we really need a tot lot, which was something we would have never considered for this type of housing in the past? Maybe we do. We're at a stage where we built 3/4 of the project already, so we're limited to what we can do down in the fourth space, on the fourth lot. So I think there are some real difficulties to that.
Okay.
Be my answer.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
That's tough.
I think staff answered a lot of my questions earlier today.
Okay. So we don't have a vote, but we need to do something
need
and
to
figure out
indicate.
if it's going to the consent?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So is there a motion?
No, you
No.
just,
We haven't had a discussion,
We
have
have to
we?
have a discussion.
Oh.
Yeah.
a discussion.
We've been, I feel like.
We've been
maybe
asking
between
question.
Planning commission and now, I feel like we talked a lot. Okay, discussion.
Well, I
think
don't
we've
mind
had
getting the
the
ball
discussion.
rolling, but somebody else could go first if they want.
You can go ahead.
But
Excuse me.
I think, I've been living with this project for a long time. As I mentioned earlier, it first came under my view in 2013, and I asked the question, why not look at it completely as a one package? And that wasn't the decision made then. And I voted it down. Members of your team actually invited me to come and speak after I had voted no. And this is full disclosure, so that I was able to then discuss, well, what some of my concerns were with some of the original ideas. And notions of putting the parking in the back so that it was adjacent to the railroad tracks as opposed to in front, that would have made the street even seem wider, was one of the concerns. So the building gets pushed to the front, making sure that there are street trees, that there was continuous sidewalks, making sure that there were open spaces. All that was of a major concern. And I know Kurt Kiesecker also was somebody that participated in some of those discussions just to get the project team to understand what some of the urban design concerns were. And all that was adjusted. And piecemeal approach was starting to make sure that it had a cohesion to it, that there was a streetscape that was creating an edge to the street, that people psychologically, once there's an edge, they do start slowing down in their traffic patterns, because that is a runway. It still is. It won't really slow down until there's building on the other side of the street that matches the verticality of your Carlton views. So I then look at, so we don't have a fully detailed site plan. I mean, this is a 5-acre site. It's not a 12-acre site like Friendship Court. There wasn't a longstanding existing community to work with. There was no one being displaced. It was all brand new housing. And that's something I can't get out of my brain, that this has been the only team of people building new affordable housing in the city. The Housing Authority has been working on redevelopment. The PHA has been working on redevelopment. AHIP is working on rehabs. Habitat does do new construction, but it's all kind of a single-family, simple fee, detached or detached single-family homes. The scale is small. So this was something that was really starting to do the work of creating the massive numbers of units that we need in this city to tackle that 3,300 deficit, affordable housing deficit that we have. And it was, in my mind, doing it in an urban design manner that was actually, given that there's no control district here, no architectural design control district, it was following rules. It was following some good notions of urban design. So I'm having a tough time saying no to the project when they haven't designed to a T all the open space. It's not required by our ordinance. As we all know, I've been hammering home the need for a form-based code. If we had a form-based code, there would have been specific kinds of parks that they would have picked, and we would have known exactly what was going in. Our zoning doesn't require that. And it winds up being designed by committee. The Planning Commission designs it, or then the council then designs it. We got to get better zoning. I agree. But given this point in time, and there is ample space, there's a lot of space that can be designed, and I'm hoping that you do engage your residents to get a really good understanding of what's needed there. Otherwise, you're going to have residents coming to this chamber, and there'll be an out revolt on your hands. So I think when I think about, from the open space standpoint, the fact that it's in an area now, the William Mills Carlton Road area, that is also becoming a much more attractive place to live. When we moved the pump station from the William Mills, when we contained the odors at the treatment plant, all of a sudden, this became more desirable. This is not an undesirable place to live. And in many ways, this is like a down payment on making sure that this area stays affordable. And it's made me even think that in all our small area plans, the first thing we should do is make sure that we land bank and then build a chunk of affordable housing, and then let the planning begin, so that we're not, creating an environment that doesn't have a core of affordable housing in it. So I'm in good conscience, I don't think I can deny this project, and because I want the son of the form-based code to align with the moon of the small area plan, that we have all the constellations aligned to get the perfect plan. It's not happening. I've been trying to get small area plans and zoning changes for 6 years. This is moved along in a fashion that, in spite of it being piecemeal, is actually one of the more cohesive developments I've seen in the city. That it will create a sense of place over time, and it gives us 154 units of affordable housing. Even if they don't get the LIHTC, and it's then still 66% affordable housing on the whole project site. We don't ever get more than 5% affordable housing in our private development projects. So even without the LIHTC, there is 99 affordable housing units. In which case, if we don't get the LIHTC, one of the arguments that the public has been giving us, i.e. that this is concentrated poverty, is clearly put to bed. I personally don't think this is concentrated poverty in this area, because there's a wide range of housing costs and types in this whole neighborhood. And I also think we do need to ask for the bus stop. We must have that bus stop in place. And I guess that is something we can require. So that's my position. I do support this. And I do think it follows good planning practice. It would be better. We need to get a small area plan in this area pronto. But I do think we are also bumping up against an incredible crisis with our affordable housing. And this is the group that's been getting it built. And it's actually being built in a good form.
So for me, in terms of looking, I have the same complaints that I've had in terms of the quality of the current housing based on, what we're hearing, the fact that with your comments about management will get better as a result of or getting better, but will be better as a result of the new building and the funding streams tied to that. But I think we need to make sure that we're not just building spaces, but we're building spaces that we won't be having these conversations in, 10, 15, 20 years. I also think it's very important to make sure that there is, in terms of the open space use, that there are, like you said, you didn't plan for children, but there are children. So, where are they able to play? So we have spaces, but are they in terms of everything? I mean, I'm thinking of in terms of MAP and obesity, you just, supported charging, the health department and the study there on our system. We need to make sure that, especially for low income housings, that the systems are in place so that it's healthy, that they're healthy spaces. So I still, I haven't heard the answers that I need to hear for that. And in terms of the PUD, if you do not receive the LIHTC credits, the questionable and what will happen as a result of not receiving those credits to the development. So those are the reason. I just think that, and council has to be very strategic about where we allocate what we support. And for me, this is not one of the projects that I'm going to support. Are there any other?
I've already chimed in. I think at best we need to defer it, or I don't know.
We asked a lot of questions today about the timing of deferral, and so I think that it was kind of presented, and my understanding was that to do that and just even an aggressive timeline, it would result in them missing their deadline for applying for the tax credits.
Mr. Bellamy, not to put pressure on you, but I will. We've had some patterns where I'm inclined to follow what you will do on this.
Yeah. I'm just really not convinced with where it currently is. And I think you, in some ways, have answered several of questions. I'm just not happy with where it is right now. That's just me being completely honest.
So where are you?
I mean, I just can't. I struggle with sitting up here and saying we're not going to be taking advantage of creating affordable housing units. I mean, that's what we hear loud and clear. And I understand I have to kind of separate out my concerns about the maintenance of these properties because that's not what we're basing this zoning decision on. So I'm trying to kind of separate that out. I do have, my biggest concerns are just around the usability of the whole development for the community which lives there, and how activated it can be and accessible to, just the outdoors and, the health side of things. And so that's just kind of where I've been. And that's why just the not knowing and just kind of leaving this as kind of a blank slate in terms of these green spaces has certainly weighed on me. But I'm just struggling because I realize if this doesn't go through, then we're letting go of an opportunity for additional housing that we don't see these opportunities come up very often. And so Councilor Gavlin's points were weighing heavily on me in that regard.
I respect.
And I'm worried about, I mean, I'm really torn on this too, and I'm worried about the perfect being the enemy of the good in a small city that's landlocked. And we're not making decisions in the county, we're making decisions for 10 square miles, and we know that we have this crisis bearing down on us. But I'm also concerned about having repeated divided 3-2 votes here. And the signal, but I am, and we hear about it a lot. And if we're gonna have a divided 3-2 vote here where that doesn't look good or feel good, and I don't see the need for it, I mean, I don't really wanna take part in that.
If I may just add, I mean, there's concern about this not being a healthy environment, but given the sidewalks, and it's what, 0.6 miles to the river park, it's about the same distance to Reeves Park. The problem has always been lack of pedestrian infrastructure. That's going to be put in place. I think, this is a 5-acre site. It's not a 12-acre site like Friendship Court, and I love the fact that Friendship Court has become a model. It's fantastic. Again, that was a standing community that was involved with facing relocation. This is brand new buildings being built as buildings are typically built in a city, parcel by parcel along a street, unrelated buildings. So I think it's almost thinking almost like a suburban model if you think that this parcel needed, or this project needed to have its own kind of recreation center. Even the park in Friendship Court's going to be a public park. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a public park because it's a 12-acre block. It's not 5 acres. But the density is the same. The resulting density in Friendship Court is 31, 32 dwelling units per acre. That's what the new density here is. And remember those pictures of that industrial site. That took an awful lot of money to clean up. And that is a carrying cost. That is what we're facing in terms of properties to redevelop in this city.
Well, that's where I'm left with, like, what else is going to go there? I mean, honestly, it's pretty limiting. I mean, it will continue to be vacant, and then we've just lost an opportunity to develop something that can really help us with our housing goals. Because the ship has sailed in so many levels. I mean, there's multiple phases that are happening. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about this last piece and what becomes of it.
So are you all saying that they could not come back to us with a better plan in a year, in a few months?
They lose the LIHTC. They lose the LIHTC application.
But you can apply for that annually.
Well, in a year's time, construction costs are going to be that much more expensive.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay,
that's the reality.
What's the next step since we don't have a vote? I mean,
I think it sounds like there's some difference of opinion, so probably to have this as an action item on the next agenda.
Do we even have 3 votes for it to go to the next? I mean, is there a majority here that wants it to go on to the next? I mean, I'm not sure that there is, because I really don't want to be against Mr. Bellamy and Ms. Walker on this one. I mean, I don't.
I'm still not sure why.
Because
you think this is a good project.
Because I am concerned about the impression that this is sending the community on these equity issues. I'm concerned about that. I think that if we know that we need to do equity, we know we need to do affordable housing, but if I'm concerned about. We've heard it so many times from public commenters who say, you all are having these 3-2 votes. There's a race issue. There's this, that, and the other thing. And I want to support my colleagues and not join in this. So if there's, and if there's this frame that's being put on this, that there's an equity problem here because of the past issues with this, with the developer, then I think it's important for us to have some unity on moving past that. That's why.
Oh, God. I mean, I don't know why y'all looking at me.
So what are our next steps, Mr. Blair?
Well, this is the first of 2 readings for this one. Now, there was the public hearing, and I believe there was a quorum of council at the planning commission hearing as well. But it is set for 2 readings, since it is an ordinance. In effect, I think the usual procedure is at this stage, you decide whether you want it on your consent agenda or as an action item at your next meeting. I think Councilor Signer is simply asking, should you short circuit the process at this point and not even go to the second reading? Is that correct?
Well, I guess we could, I guess if it moves to the second one, if there are 2, if there's a majority who want it to go to the second one, and then in the intervening time, there could be more public comment, there could be maybe, I don't think the developer wants to change anything, but they conceivably, they couldn't, right? Because then we move. That's right. Okay.
Right.
So
Right.
all it is it's moving, so it gives us one more bite at the apple, but
I've
I've expressed myself fully.
So I guess to my colleagues, are we prepared to kill this project tonight? And if not, then it needs to move to the next meeting, at least give more time to think about it, talk to people in the community, and then we have the final vote on the, I guess it'd be, what's the date?
December 17th.
December 17th. That,
I'm open in that regards to having a further discussion on the 17th. I would be interested in possibly maybe myself and Mayor Walker meeting with you all to further discuss in detail if Mayor Walker is up to it. Well, I can't speak for her.
This sounds wise to me, Mr.
Yeah.
Dr. Bellamy, because the question of leverage has come up a lot in this, and guessing and knowing just how much sway we have, and it's like you don't want to negotiate against yourself a lot of the time, but here's how much influence could be had if we just didn't vote for it, and then what would happen when they came back? Would they, or did we just lose? That comes up a lot with these things.
Yeah.
And I think that you could get a better sense of that through that kind of exchange. Maybe.
We've seen this happen before.
Right. But then if we lose it entirely, and that's going to be kind of
Yeah. So in that regard, I would be open to moving forward for us to have a
So you want it on as an action item?
as an
for the
action
next-
item, not consent.
Okay. All right.
okay.
Action
Sounds
item
wise.
next. All right, thank you. All right, next we have a report on welcoming Greater Charlottesville.
Richard.
No? We were doing so well on time. What happened? I thought we'd be home by now.
Yes, it is.
Mayor Walker, council members, good evening. One last item, hang in there. I'm Russ Linden. I live at 336 Parkway Street in Charlottesville. I'd like to tell you about a task force that was formed 21 months ago to help the community, both city and county, become as welcoming and inclusive to everyone, especially to people who come from other countries. Briefly, the background. In 2015, a city council in this chamber voted to join the Welcoming America Network, a collection of cities and counties that commit themselves to becoming more inclusive. And then in 2017, about 2 years later, then Mayor Signer took another important step. He formed a task force, which is now called the Welcoming Greater Charlottesville Task Force, to take a vision, an image of a more welcoming community and put together a group that would take concrete actions to try to make it happen. That was an important step. What's our mission? Our mission is to create this kind of inclusive community with a special focus on people who come from elsewhere, often fleeing terrible conditions, trying to become residents, contributing members of the community, by giving them some tangible support and educating others about what these groups are, what their needs are, and how they contribute to our community. Who's on the task force? I won't give you names, but I'll give you ideas of where they come from. Here we go. So as you can see, there are members of city offices, some wonderful nonprofits, Families in Action, International Neighbors, the International Rescue Committee, a lot of help from the Madison Regional Library, Latino Health Initiative, one I didn't even know about at UVA. We have members from Legal Aid, Literacy Volunteers, a group in town called Presidential Precinct, Sin Barreras, one of the leading advocacy groups for Latinos, and Speak Language Center, a group that helps people who speak English as a second language. Why does this keep switching? There we go. What are we doing? Let me walk you through 4 projects. One of our members, Aaron Farrington, is a filmmaker. He created a film that was shown this year in Welcoming Week and then at the Virginia Film Festival called Know Your Neighbor. It's a powerful film. He interviews 7 or 8 immigrants and refugees who basically tell their story, where they come from, why they came here, some of the challenges, how they've developed, how they're contributing. The film was wildly well received. Over 200 people saw it here during Welcoming Week. We supported it with some support with money and finding these people to be interviewed. 3 other activities, Dreaming America, which I'm especially proud of, the Welcoming Week events, which I'll tell you about in a second, and then the one we're excited about for this winter, the creation of a community ID card. Welcoming Week, I think, is in its 3rd or 4th year. It's a week-long celebration of the wonderful different cultures that make our community rich and diverse. Over 25 activities this year for all ages. One, as I mentioned, this film that we supported. I'm sure many of you have gone to Gay Pride and Seville Sabroso, 2 all-day events. Thousands of people attend. It's really incredible. Speakers on all kinds of topics. One of the areas that I think it's been especially important that we've been hitting hard on is to dispel some of the images people have that they create of stereotypes, thinking about people from other countries as them. We all know the power and sometimes the destructive power of stereotypes. So we've been trying to put a human face on the people we're here to support. A health festival for Latinos and others, lots of activities for families. So that was Welcoming Week this year. What was our role? We provided a lot of publicity, some financial support when people needed it, and we sponsored some events. The event that I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago that I'm especially delighted at, something we should all be amazingly proud of, was put together by CHS students when they learned about a group of teenagers, a number of teenagers from South and Central American countries who were taken away from their families and put into jail in Stanton, and they've been languishing there. But these are kids with energy and creativity, and they wrote poems called Dreaming America, the America they can't get to because they're in jail. The students at CHS heard about this story. They got a copy of the book. They became impassioned, and they wrote a play. This is all done by students. A student directed the play, and students performed the play back in September at Welcoming Week. Over 200 people sat there in awe at CHS watching these students do this amazing event. If you haven't seen it, I've got a videotape, and I'd be happy to send you a link to it. Well, the word got out. And so not only did they produce it once, but now Burley Middle School has asked for and received confirmation that these students will put it on there. Washington and Lee University is going to receive this performance, and several other requests the students can't keep up with because they also happen to be students. It's an amazing group of young people. Not only did they do all that, they raised almost $700 to give to a nonprofit that's supporting these teenagers from other countries sitting in this jail in Stanton. These are kids we really should be proud of. I was hoping to bring them tonight until I saw we were last on the agenda. Some of them have to get up in the morning. Our next big project, and this is the other one that I'm especially excited about, and I've talked with almost all of you about it. Madam Mayor, I'm sorry I haven't been able to get with you on this, but I would love to if that's possible. This is to create an ID card for anyone who needs them. As you can see, up to 11% of citizens in this country don't walk around with an ID card. It's crazy, but that's the truth. Those of us who have D cards never think about them. But in fact, you need an ID card to do most things in these days. You have to have an ID to take out a bank account, to get a loan, to get certain prescription drugs. Sometimes parents want to accompany their kids on a school trip. Health services, a lot of social services, the social services department here in the city and the county, we need ID cards. Now, let me be clear, this is not a government-issued ID card. Some of the people we're trying to help, frankly, are leery of government. They've had unpleasant experiences with government. So we're doing what about 24 other communities are doing. We're creating a community-based ID card. In addition to getting these tangible services, this has got a symbolic value. We've talked with a lot of Latinos and others in the community who say that if they had an ID, they would feel more part of the community. And it's hard to put a price on that. How does it help the community? We interviewed some people in the law enforcement communities in North Carolina, which is a leader in producing community ID cards. And what the police leader said is that this program gives police a chance to have a positive interaction with people who are sometimes marginalized and people who sometimes, frankly, just don't trust the police as we wish they could. Police are available when we'll have monthly events to give out the ID cards to people who have the documents to show that they are who they say they are. Police can be in a positive role with people needing IDs, and that can start to build some trust. And what some police leaders have said publicly in North Carolina is they've got better public safety now because communities that never used to call the police to say there's weird people on our street, there's people doing bad stuff, now they're calling them. And that kind of information, as you know, can lead to greater safety. So there's lots of people who win in doing this. 2 wonderful churches have stepped up to say that they'll support it. We learned from other communities that if you have a church group supporting this as the active sponsors, there tends to be more trust. The 2 groups are New Beginnings Christian Community and Hinton Avenue United Methodist. What difference would it make? We have roughly 8,500 Latinos, and that's just one of the many groups needing an ID in the city and county. And we know from other communities, a great number of them will rush to get one. South Bend, Indiana, like us, an academic community, a little smaller in size than the combined city and county here. Over 1,200 people signed up and got an ID card in just their first year alone. So we're not talking about something that's small here. This can make a huge difference. The obvious question people ask me when I say it's not a city ID, city-issued or county-issued ID, is, well, how does it get credible? Why should anybody believe it's real? And it's a great question, and the answer is that the groups we want to accept this program, police, social services, health department, other municipal services, pharmacies, they are part and parcel of the planning. So because we're planning it with their input, they have no problem in accepting the IDs once it's ready. So that's how it's going to work. We'll have monthly ID drives. Again, police and others will be there to interact with and form relationships with the people who come for it. And the information we get from a lot of other communities is that it's been a winner for everybody involved. There's one more thing. You see at the bottom of the slide, people who already have IDs, like I suspect almost all of us in this chambers, we're going to encourage them to apply. You might ask why? Why put one more piece of plastic in your wallet? And the answer is other communities that have done that found that the people who carry the community ID card, it doesn't become stigmatized. It's not one of those things that, oh, that's for those people. You can see where I'm going with this. So we're going to try to make this something that we all sign up for. The good news is I'm not asking you for money, but if we get the money we've applied for and we think that it looks good from the Community Foundation, we'll have enough to start in February. But we do make a couple of asks. We hope that, and I've spoken with Mr. Murphy about this, we hope that if you support this, you'll let city employees know that we think this is a good thing and that their agencies, we hope, will support it. And while we're not asking for anything tangible, there are ways you can help us without money. A simple example might be in the monthly notices that go out with the water and gas bill. Put something in there when we start this off, we think in February, that lets people know, here's the information, here's how you can benefit. Your backing will be really, really helpful. So thank you for your time. I know it's late, but if you have questions, comments, any concerns, please have at it.
Thank you.
Wonderful idea. Hoping that we can, Dr. Linden, I'm hoping that we can fully support it. I think there's a lot of members of our community who would benefit from having this form of identification, and I appreciate your work as well as Mr. Signer for getting this off the ground. So,
Thank you.
I want to say, thanks to you and your committee for so much work. This is a lot of time and a lot of care and a lot of research and all the conversations with the other cities we talked about. And aside from the many benefits, just two comments. One is that in this time of otherization and increasing attacks, that I had never heard. I did a conference earlier this year about, and allyship came up, allyship, and I'd never heard that concept before. But having allies turns out to be one of the biggest things you can do in this time of bigotry and increasing otherization. And you know, like treaties are one thing where you have allies. That's a whole other thing. But, you know, you can have allies, however robust they are, can really matter. If somebody knows that people are with them, institutions are with them, a community is with them, corporations with them, a city. So to me, that's one of the major things that you're doing with this. And I think that's really to be credited. And I mean, when we did all that stuff, like at the very beginning, I mean, these are the folks, we did an event at a church, a Christian church, where, you know, there were like 300 people who came out. Mr. Murphy was there, and they you know, we had rules, only use your first name, just to hear about the approach of the city and county. These are folks who are in the shadows a lot of the time, and it's horrific. It's a completely unfair reality, and they don't call the police, and they don't. So bringing them into giving them allies is, I think, just very noble and really important now. And the second thing is, I think that we ought to signal to private sector that they have an important role to play here. Banks, major employers, the gyms, whatever. I mean, all the places where, you know, and there are major stakeholders here, Chamber of Commerce, like, you know, lots, where I think that if the city is on board, that could signal further, let's let the allyship grow, major employers, and I think that the more the merrier. But anyway, so I want to add to Dr. Bellamy's comments.
I just want to say I totally support the in-kind assistance with publicity. And that's minor what we could do to contribute, given all the hard work you've put into this. And it's really exciting. I don't know exactly, you know, what end game it means. Like, how's it going to change the overall tenor of our atmosphere? We're already a welcoming community, but again, it's all that notion of the example you set for others, and I really appreciate that a lot. And yeah, I'd love to sign up for a card as well.
Super. You'd be first in line.
Yes.
And I haven't met with you, but I know when this first came up, I had some pause just for safety, you know, of the people who could not get an, you know, state of Virginia ID, but then what kind of system their information was being put in, if that information could be turned over, like this, you know, issues that we were facing with the jail and, you know, like ICE information. Is that something that they can come and ask for as a government? So I did have concerns about just the safety of individuals who may not, you know, have an ID. And definitely it will have to be a community effort to make sure that, you know, that the community is accepting these IDs, and it's not, you know, used in any way to track, you know, individuals or anything like that. So that was something that I'm sure I sent an email or something about when I first heard about it, but I didn't go back and look. But that was a concern that I would still have for anything. And I know at that point, I think it was being requested, and maybe the city sponsor in some way, if I remember correctly. I'm not sure. Right now, I didn't have time to go back and look, but yeah. So that would just be some of the concerns that I would still have.
Happy to follow up with you, but the quick response is one of the benefits of it not being government is nobody can issue a FOIA request that the churches have to honor. ICE can't go into a church to grab people. We know that's the law, or that's their policy.
And they're being protected in some churches now,
Exactly.
which is, so.
But there may be more, so I could follow up.
All right.
But any other
Thank you.
questions, concerns too? Because I'd love to hear your concerns. No? Okay.
Do we
Thank
need any action among us to just signal support in kind of any sort, or there's no resolution or anything?
We're not requesting that, Mr. Signer, in part because we don't want this to become politicized.
Got it. Makes sense.
And unfortunately, that's the environment we're in.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Great.
But to the extent that each of the 5 of you do support it, the city staff will know that, and for now, that's great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Okay. So we are at other business.
I just have a resolution to make a motion on.
Oh.
Now therefore be it resolved by the council of the city of Charlottesville that it approves the memorandum of agreement to facilitate expansion, renovation, and efficient and safe operation of the Albemarle Circuit Court and the Albemarle General District Court and the Charlottesville General District Court.
Second.
We need to vote. Right.
Yay. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Okay. That carries 5-0. And is there any other business?
I'm tired.
11:15.
All right. So matters by the public? Any?
I'll just say, Carlton Views, there's over 100 people, real people in the city affected by that decision, people at 60% of AMI and below. And I think on that, it's really important to ground decisions in that, regardless of what you really think, regardless of what you want, regardless of what you think is best, lead with integrity, lead with honesty. There's 100 people at 60% of AMI and below affected by this. And I think the biggest signal that is sent is not voting against or for, because I think there's legitimate concerns either way. But the bigger signal is if there is a decision to play political games with the lives of over 100 people at 60% of AMI and below, and not lead with integrity and what you actually think is going to help these people. And I'll just step back from that and say the comp plan is going to be coming out soon, and there's going to be a lot of big changes. And again, if we're thinking about that number of 3,300 units, there's going to be a lot of changes in terms of apartment complex and duplexes and triplexes, and I can guarantee that on every single one of those, there's going to be a small subset of people who come to the city and say, I don't want density in my neighborhood, I don't want changes in my neighborhood, and historically we know what that means. It means I don't want working class people in my neighborhood. I don't want non-white people in my neighborhood. I don't want higher density with more affordable apartments. And again, this is separate from Carlton Views. But when that happens, it's going to take a lot of political courage to make the right decision of what you think is actually going to help the people of this city. And that's going to be coming up. And if you don't lead with political courage and you're not willing to actually do what you think helps people in this city, there's over 50,000 people who are going to be affected. And I am just extremely disappointed by how I saw that just unfold. And I'm speaking just honestly, outside of politics, outside of calculation, that's just sad.
So I have a question for you.
And I'm not talking about not supporting it or supporting it.
Have
I'm
you
talking
been
about-
to the current, have you been to Carlton Views? And have you talked to anyone who currently lives there?
I have, but I won't pretend that I have any kind of deep, intimate knowledge. And I want to be clear. I think there's legitimate, real concerns, and I think if someone wants to vote against it, I respect that and I understand that, and I'll be the first to say, there's a lot of things I don't understand about the project. What concerns me is if people are basing their vote not on what they think is best out of integrity, but out of some kind of political calculation. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about voting yes or no, because I think there are legitimate reasons to do either. I'm talking about, transparency, integrity, and where people are coming from on where they're going to vote.
Any other?
I guess I'm a little bit confused about the process, but I guess you're doing the second reading and
We'll, have it on the action item, another discussion and vote next.
maybe some of you guys are going to be able to meet with the developers reps in between now and then. And I think that's really great. I think just, a simple conversation between y'all, might do the trick. These are very skilled, knowledgeable developers, and I think just a little bit of information on programming of the open space to serve the residents of the facility is something that they could entirely do before March. Just thinking about, Garrett Square when it was built and West Haven, these places were built with amenities for outdoor amenities like Dr. Bellamy described. And it just doesn't seem like it's too much for them to provide in a schematic form on a plan. Anyway, but thank you very much for putting up with a lot of email. I appreciate your work.
Mayor Walker, can I ask Mr. Blair a question related to that? Mr. Blair, how much can their site plan change without triggering a whole kind of restart on the process? And just including, like, if there was more detail saying that they put, this is going to be a playground for children on the site plan. I mean, how much latitude do they have?
Well, if I could ask you a question, I mean, when you talk about site plan, are you assuming that the rezoning has been approved? Or you?
I think she's referring to the rezoning.
I'm referring to the
okay,
rezoning.
I just want to be
because
sure that you're
people
referring-
are hoping that there's going to be changes made, and I don't want to project anything that cannot be done.
Right, and the reason I ask that is, as you know, the site plan process is completely different. And that
Right.
would usually, when we use the term site plan in the legal sense, that comes after the rezoning. But you're talking more about the documents
Yes.
that have been presented as a site plan as part of.
Exactly, thank you.
I think there is some leeway as long as it, reading the case law, a couple things stand out. One, there's a case called Aerogas out of the Virginia Supreme Court. And it certainly says that a council or board of supervisors can make amendments to proffers after a public hearing. Otherwise, if your hands were completely tied, as the case states, you'd almost never be able to finish the process, because usually there's some detail in proffers or in the rezoning that has to be discussed among yourselves. And it, in effect, would preclude any discussion if you had no ability to make any change without restarting the process. Saying that, I think there's a fine line between, does it make the use more intensive, or does it completely alter what has been advertised, compared to perhaps if you were moving around an element on a site plan that didn't affect the intensity or the use of the property, and the developer submitted that and agreed to that change. I think at that point you would be able to, in effect, amend the proffers without a new public hearing process.
So I have a question before we go in terms of the, if there are, it turns out that there are 3 counselors who think that this is a project that needs to move forward. If the developer is saying that they are strapped in terms of financing some of these public spaces that we're talking about, is it our obligation to fund, to create them in the area? So that's what I would say. If we are saying that, even though I have some concerns about the, the management part of it, but if we're saying that, and, believing them that they're going to do better with management, do we then take maybe some of these affordable housing dollars, or take some money from, I don't know, you tell us where, and, help create some of these spaces that we're discussing?
Well, if I may, the park that's in Friendship Court, when it's built, it's going to be then deeded over to the city, and it will become a city park. So that happens. In fact, it used to be that the city would always build the public spaces. It's only been since World War II that you've got private developers responsible for building open space. And that has added cost to individual projects, and it's added right down to street trees. and when the municipality used to build the roads and the parks with street trees, that was a cost that was borne by government. And now it's suddenly a cost borne by private development, which again makes it marginalized and debatable.
Well, I don't
So-
want to set that we will take care of it, but I'm saying since we're talking about the percentage of affordable housing, if they receive the credits and if it's built, and if there are 3 people who think, I'm just putting it out there that I also think that we need to take some of the responsibility for creating, helping to create these spaces and whatever that possibly looks like.
I have no problem with taking over a public park, making a public park. I'm just not sure where that would happen on that site, other than the front plaza. If there's an interior space that becomes part of Parks and Rec, I guess that's an interesting idea, that would become an exercise room. The other idea, though, is that, and then Mr. Emery has been an advocate for this, and you look at our small area plan chart, if that became a small area plan, we could designate with public input on the other side of the area, there'd be a designation of a public park, which then that would become reserved as it was done in the strategic investment area.
Or could they just, could they meet with Parks and Rec in the next week to see if they could work something out? Maybe there's some sympathy there, or some, to Mayor Walker's point, there might be some idea. Parks and Rec has so much going on.
Parks and Recreation can certainly be made available. I mean,
For a meeting.
The developer left us a while ago. It's hard
Right.
for me to comment on what they're able to do. So.
I don't know.
Well, we can check with them to see, can staff and see where they are with this, what we could come up with on this one.
Follow up with Mr. Daly tonight.
And better construction.
Amen.
So that, Mr. Murphy. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. My grandparents in New York used to take me to